The Locked On Podcast Network presents the NBA Big 3 in 30. The three biggest stories in the NBA from our local experts at the Locked On Podcast Network. We bring you the real story, why it matters, what's next, who wins the big game, and more, all in 30 minutes. The NBA Big 3 in 30 starts now with the biggest story in the NBA.
Kawhi Leonard has participated in full contact practice for the first time.
You are Locked On Clippers, your daily Los Angeles Clippers podcast.
Ladies and gentlemen, we're finally here. December 19th, 2024. Would have been my grandpa's birthday. Would have been his 107th birthday. No, 6th. But man, what amazing news we received on Wednesday. Kawhi Leonard is finally practicing 5-on-5 contact basketball again. One step closer to returning. Now, they said that he wouldn't be playing on this road trip, which is fine. That means he's going to be out the next 3 games. He will have missed 30 games. But the fact that he will be practicing with the team, he's around the team and going to practice with them on this trip, it leads me to believe that given that extra week that we're going to spend on the road, that December 27th against Golden State is the night. I don't have any sources on this. I'm just going with my feeling. 8 days' time, Golden State, the return of Kawhi on NBA TV, Friday night, game number 31. Just feels too good to be true. But honestly, not too good to be true. It feels written. But it's just such great news because it makes you think like we're really almost here. Now, here's what everybody needs to realize. Kawhi Leonard, when he first comes back, he will be on a minutes restriction. Now, I don't imagine him coming off the bench, but he will be on a minutes restriction. It's going to take time for him to return to his old self. And remember what people were saying in the beginning of last season, and of course, when he was working his way back from that ACL in 2023. It's going to take time for him to look like that Kawhi Leonard of old. In the beginning, everyone's going to freak out and say, man, he looks washed. Maybe he'll just never be the same. And then slowly but surely, as he gets more comfortable and gets accustomed to the speed of the game again, he will hopefully be every bit as good or maybe even just a tad worse than that Kawhi Leonard that we got last year. And even if he is a tad worse, that's a guy that's flirting with top 10 player in the NBA, maybe even top 5 player in the NBA still. Because on his day, I mean, he gives you a little bit of everything. The defense, the IQ, the scoring ability from 3 levels, the ability to get a basket and a shot when he wants. And, of course, what you can't teach. He's got that dog when he's on that court. It is a huge step in the right direction to hear that Kawhi Leonard is finally practicing fully with the team in 5-on-5. And I'm okay with him not playing these 3 games because, coming back against the Mavs, really high potential for an intense game, a lot of physicality, some chippiness, given the recent playoff history between the teams. I would like him to ease his way back, maybe even just in front of the home crowd, so there's so much positive energy around him. Not that he cares. I think he's locked in no matter what he's doing. But just, I guess, the feel around it all. But yeah, the big news. Kawhi Leonard practicing fully 5-on-5, will be on the road trip, will not be playing.
Gametime has a new feature called Gametime Picks that makes getting tickets for your favorite live events even easier. Gametime Picks filters out the fluff to show you only the incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. Curation makes it easier to save more on sports, concerts, comedy, theater, and more near you. You can take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDON for $20 off. Download Gametime today. What time is it? Gametime.
We take a look back at the NBA Cup and try to figure out, what does it actually mean?
You are Locked On Bucks, your daily Milwaukee Bucks podcast.
You mentioned this shortly after the game ended of, one of the things is we're still trying to figure out, what does the NBA Cup mean and what's the value of it. One thing that was apparent was the Bucks cared, and Giannis clearly cared. And your tweet of, what we've really been robbed of and missed for the last 2 years is seeing Giannis play in these games that have stakes attached to it. So that was certainly a welcome sight to see the other night.
Yeah, I mean, I think, look, I get it. It's amusing. We can be cynical. We can poke fun at a tournament that was conjured from nothing, just a couple of years ago, and it doesn't have history. And, are the stakes high enough? It's just, $500,000 for players, but like, what is really the significance of a tournament, in mid-November to early December, et cetera. But yeah, I think just reflecting, it's easy if you're a fan base of a team that didn't win the NBA Cup. Imagine that. Like. It's easy to be like, oh well, the NBA Cup, whatever, blah blah blah. We've seen our team win a championship, and very recently, right? Like we're not coming at this from the perspective of a team that has never won anything, and we're just so desperate for anything that give us the summer league title, give us the NBA Cup, whatever. We know it was like, we know how special it was to see a team led by Giannis and a number of the core guys from this team win an NBA championship. And the 3 years since that have underscored how hard it is to do that, and how much luck there is, and how easily your chances of having, that shot at a repeat or a second championship just be snatched away, whether it was Chris Middleton and the wet spot against the Bulls, whether it was Giannis and Kevin Love taking, quote unquote, trying to take a charge against Giannis, and Giannis getting hurt against the Heat, or of course last year, just the freak injury that Giannis suffered late in the regular season that kept him out of the playoffs entirely. We have no idea, right? We have no idea how many chances you're going to get to win an NBA championship or, win anything, right? Have good regular seasons, blah, blah, blah. Guys can miss huge chunks of the season, things like that. So, I mean, I had a great time watching this game last night. I had very low expectations. I think you guys said it on the pod as well after the game. We didn't know what we were going to get from the Bucks in this game, especially against a team like the Thunder, and especially considering the Bucks have not been able to get over the hump against a great team so far yet this season. So I went in with very low expectations. If the Bucks had won, I would have not been very broken up about it. But when you win, and not just when you win, but when you see the team come together in the way that they did, and you could tell like this was, a legitimization of the turnaround that's happened for them, and the feeling that this team had that they could get back on track, and that they were, stronger together. And Doc's comment from pregame that they had from the video feed, right? Together we win. Yeah, I mean, it's not the NBA championship, right? If they, get injuries and go out in the first round again, like it's going to be a disappointing season. But only one team out of 30 gets to win a championship every year. And we, of all fan bases, know usually that's not going to be your team. And so I think I think it's a great thing just to give another opportunity for a team to rise to an occasion in a different way as well, in a single elimination tournament. Once you get down to the quarterfinals, I mean, it's almost single elimination the whole way through when you think about how hard it is to get to the elimination rounds. Yeah. So I think the chance to create, even if we can say it's artificial construct, whatever you want to say about the Cup, but to create the circumstances around which great players, whether it was LeBron last year, Giannis this year, like great players took this seriously and really wanted to win this. And it's not because they're delusional or they never won anything before.
Right.
Because they're freaking competitors, like Giannis, like Doc said, you put a trophy in front of these guys, let's win it. Why not? Right. And, if your team loses, if you're a Celtics fan, you can say like, oh, well, it's actually better because like, we got,
low stress games. We got rest.
We got to travel.
Yeah.
And it's fine because the Celtics won a championship. So they, they got what everyone's after last year. But go out and win, and to have a chance to see your team win something other than just like a single big game that's just ultimately another game on the calendar, which is 82 games we see before the playoffs. That was just really cool. And I mean, I feel no guilt over being excited to see the Bucks win something. And even if it's not everything, seeing your team win anything, I said last night, it's really fun. And it's fun, I think, for fan bases to come together and be able to celebrate something. I think for this Bucks team in particular, it's a culmination of clawing their way out of that ditch. And I think for Giannis, it's an awesome, launching pad for getting him back into that MVP conversation in a really meaningful way. It's clearly dominating, outplaying another top 3 MVP candidate in doing so. And again, if the Bucks stumble from here on out, then, we can begin to second guess it. But for where they are right now, I think it was a super fun cap to a very roller coaster first, 6 weeks of the season. And I had a great time with it. And I think Bucks fans celebrate it, enjoy it. It's not the be all end all, but I mean, if you're not going to enjoy your team winning a trophy, then like, what's the point?
I know that's right. Like the journey is fun. Like there is some fun in the journey as well. Like to think about where this Bucks team was this time last month, middle of November, when you're just like, I don't know what's exactly happening. It feels like they're executing, so they're not together, ball sticking, all these different things that were happening. To see them get to this point in the season where they've been able to put together a string of wins, be able to dig themselves out of the hole that they created to start this season, and to see them get on this national stage and put on a defensive clinic, put on a spectacle of Giannis performing the way that we've been seeing him perform night in and night out as people who watch the Milwaukee Bucks every single game. But to be able to do that on a national stage where there might have been some people who haven't really seen the Bucks recently because of, the national TV schedule, as well as just saying like they haven't been good. We saw the record early on. Not going to watch. Yeah. Not going to watch the Bucks right now. To see what they were able to do on a national stage, I love that, because I've been saying I want that Giannis MVP train to carry on, because I think there's narrative involved in it that supports his case. The numbers support his case. And for him to be able to go out for this NBA Cup final game, championship game, and put together the show that he did with that triple-double, showing his impact on both sides of the ball, I think it's something that can really launch that MVP conversation around him going forward. And that's something we want to get into more probably in the next segment. But I think that this NBA Cup was a great launching place for him, given the time that we are in the season. It's still December, a lot of ball left to be played, but I think it was a perfect launching pad.
Yeah,
Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win that first $5 bet. And you can take a look maybe at some Thursday night football. The Chargers actually slight favorites tonight over the Broncos in LA. FanDuel has the Chargers laying 2.5. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL.
The Knicks are in Minnesota to visit some familiar faces, and
You are Locked On Knicks, your daily New York Knicks podcast.
Yeah, real quick. I want to talk briefly about Cat's playing the 5 for the first time in 3 years, and he played the 5 in Minnesota mostly. Defensively, I mean, he shared the front court with Taj Gibson and Gorgie Jang and other guys who at times basically played the 5, at least offensively. But Cat was supposed to be the anchor of the defense, at least in terms of the front court under Tibbs in Minnesota previously. It never really worked out. He's never been the rim protector that people thought he might be coming out of Kentucky. The block rate this year is back up to where it was, which is still modest for a center, but back to where it was when he was a 5 in Minnesota. But what have you guys seen? The Knicks are pretty middle of the pack in terms of their defense. What has he done defensively, and how could the Knicks maybe, I know there's injuries and stuff as well to other bigs with the Knicks, but what does the defense look like with Cat as the 5?
I would say it started bad, but is getting better. The lack of discipline sometimes does show, and he has, especially earlier in the season, I feel like gotten himself into foul trouble, which they just can't afford right now, because that means like Jericho. Well, okay, now they can slightly more afford it since they have Precious Achiuwa back. But I mean, at the beginning of the season, it was like if Cat made it so that he couldn't play 36, 37 minutes, like, that meant more Jericho Sims minutes, which the stats say he did well. There were some games where he looked better, but like he really crashed back to earth, at least in my opinion, recently. And that became like very untenable to play him any sort of major minutes, if Cat was not able to stay on the floor. So that was one sort of issue. And earlier in the season, I mean, players were shooting like an obscene number against. I think it was, Gavin, wasn't it over 80% at one point?
Yeah, it was like 29 at 33 or so. It was the number that was thrown out there. I think there were some people arguing that NBA.com doesn't capture every rim attempt accurately, and some of it doesn't account blocks. So there was some noise there, but it wasn't good, is the point. Yeah,
like it looked like he was either not playing the smartest with the fouls, or was being too tentative and trying not to foul. I think he's starting to find a bit of a balance now. It's helpful that he has 2 really good wing defenders, or actually 3. I mean, I think Josh Hart can throw his name in that hat too at this point. 3 really good wing defenders to kind of help him out. And OG Anunoby at his best has, shown the ability to come in and get, a help block from time to time, as long as Cat can just like be big, get his hands up and make the shot attempt a little difficult, make a guy adjust in the air. OG can come in there and kind of like just swipe the ball away and block that shot that way. So it's getting better, but we're literally already to the point where just, earlier this week, we had a mailbag question about it and went, all in on that question. And we'll probably go more all in on it of like, will this work with Mitchell Robinson at the 5 and Cat at the 4? Because it worked with Gobert. Like, can the Knicks just kind of steal the Timberwolves homework a little bit and, make that combination work? Because that might be what they need at some point later on this season, potentially in the playoffs as well, is to go to that sort of lineup. Because I do think, I don't know if I would want to see Cat as the 5 for the entire season manning the defense, just because I'm with you. I don't really think that that's his role, and that's fine because he can carry your whole offense and everything else. But it's been a little underwhelming, but passable so far, and clearly good enough for them to be, like 5 games over 500 at this point in the season, or 6 or whatever they are right now. But, like comfortably over 500 and certainly not floundering or anything.
Right. Yeah. They started getting a lot more aggressive with him, and like he was pretty much exclusively playing drop, which obviously in Minnesota was always a discussion with him, and he always struggled in that. And to start this year, like he really struggled with that. And just at times, like I think back to the Jazz loss, which was probably the Knicks' worst of the year, like along with the recent Hawks loss, where he just wasn't making contact at the rim. Like he would be jumping and someone would be 2 feet away from him. You're like, how's that even possible? Like this is one of the best athletes in the world on offense, at least in terms of his coordination and timing and flexibility. And on defense, it just, like, I know Zach Lowe always talks about that, doesn't translate for whatever reason. But recently, I think letting him blitz the ball, like play up at the level a little bit more, like it's very similar to Julius Randle, where our friend Benji Ritholtz had like an inertia theory for Julius Randle, where like if you get him in motion, you put him on a switch against a star, like he's going to look good, he's going to move his feet, capable of playing defense. Kind of same thing with Cat. Once he gets some forward momentum and is literally moving forwards instead of backwards, it looks much, much better. They've kind of gone back to playing him a drop a little bit more. And like there have been times, like I thought that the Hawks game, he didn't have the Hawks game had a great game defensively. It was the game, maybe the Magic game at the start. Like, yeah, it was Mo Wagner just torching him and had 32 points. So it's still been a little hit or miss, but I think what Alex was getting at is like, he just makes a lot more contact at the rim now. And like in a good way, like it's mostly verticality. It's mostly up and down. Knicks over the last 10 games have had the 8th best defense, in basketball. A lot of that is Mikal Bridges kind of making a leap. but a lot of that is Cat playing a lot better. The team number one over the last 10 games, though, is the Minnesota Timberwolves, and it's by a substantial margin. I'm sure. I think you literally just did an episode of this on your show, Ben, but they are allowing 99 points per 100 possessions, which of course is an absurd number. I think they led the league last year. It was something like 106. They're 4 points better than the Thunder even over the last 10 games, like 7 points better than the Rockets. That is just an absurdly high level. What's clicking for Minnesota defensively? And if you were coaching the Knicks coming in this one, how would you recommend they try to attack this suddenly super elite defense?
Yeah, I mean, it looks a lot like it did last year, honestly. And it sounds like just a really easy answer, but early this season, the Wolves were playing like they were too cool for school. Like, we got to the conference finals, we can roll the ball out and play, we'll be all right. And it was enough, they lost consecutive games to the Blazers, and they were 10-11, I think, at one point. And the scheme never really changed. It was kind of the same thing. I mean, the biggest difference is in the non-Gobert minutes. They were really struggling. They were, I think when they were 10-11, I pulled this on Cleaning the Glass, and they were like a 7th percentile defense when Gobert was off the floor. And last year they were like, even when Kat and Naz Reid were in the front court together, they were like a 77th percentile defense or something like that, which will play when you're the best defense in the league by far with Rudy on the floor. And the Rudy on the floor minutes aren't quite as good as they were last year, but they're close enough. And now over the last 7, it sounds like just too easy of an answer, but they're legit just playing harder. They're playing harder. They haven't changed the scheme. The low man help's been a lot better. That's kind of something that was really bad early in the season, was Rudy would get caught in no man's land in a drop, and the low man wouldn't rotate. And if he did, then the next rotation was late. They wouldn't X out to the corner, and you'd give up a corner three, or you'd give up a dunk. And it's defense 101. And Rudy covers a multitude of sins. But if you don't rotate behind him, and a lot of those sins are like what we saw in Utah when you have no perimeter defense, and it's why the Wolves have been so dominant defensively with Rudy, is because they have Jaden McDaniels, who is all defensive team, second team. You have Ant, who can be an all-world defender when he really applies himself on the ball. You have, good team defenders like Mike Conley. You have Nikhil Alexander-Walker. So it's a combination of just being more crisp with the rotations, and they're rebounding better too. One of the issues early in the season was kind of those intermediate rebounds that basically are 50-50 balls, long rebounds. They weren't getting to those, and now they're getting to those. I mean, so it's some flukier things like that. And then it's also just applying themselves, playing harder, crisper rotations. Nothing's changed in terms of their scheme. I wouldn't necessarily say Randle's playing any better defensively. He, to this point, hasn't been as good as Cat was last year. But I would say I would agree 100% with what you said about how those guys defend, that if you put them in space against somebody that's a similar size, even a star player, they're going to defend well, but that's not usually how the Wolves use Randle. And so just because, there's only so many matchups that are perfect for that. But all that to say, I think if I were the Knicks, I think it's just, I know the Knicks play slow, but the Wolves tend to have trouble with teams that play fast, first of all. So, and we've seen, and the Wolves also, the transition defense has been really good. I think it's first in the league as well in transition over the past few weeks, but that's where they've had their biggest issues. Teams are running after makes for a while on the Wolves. They just weren't getting back. Even teams that don't run, even teams that typically play at a slow pace. So I would say push the pace when you can, because if the Wolves get into a track meet, then, higher variance games like that are not good for the Wolves. They need to play slower. They need to control the pace. They need to set their defense. So that's one thing I would do if the Knicks are able to. And then I think just try and make Anthony Edwards defend, because that'll wear him out on offense. And I think the Wolves, they've been playing him less on option 1A for the other team. Usually it's Jaden anyway, but sometimes Ant will pick up some of those minutes, but he's been guarding lower usage type guys, I think, to kind of preserve him, because he's played so many minutes already this year. So I think if you can make Ant defend and try and wear him out a little bit, then the Wolves are kind of, they rely on Julius Randle for a lot of offense at that point, because there's nobody else that really creates for themselves. So that's probably how I'd attack the Wolves. I'm curious who you guys think will defend Anthony Edwards, and maybe that's an obvious answer, but Anthony Edwards, but also how you think the Knicks will respond to Karl-Anthony Towns coming back to Target Center, and how Cat will apply himself at Target Center. Are the Knicks going to rally around Cat, and is this going to be like this emotional, wall of emotion hitting the Wolves in Minneapolis?
It's actually really funny. I just want to say first, like when you brought up try to run against them, that was like my first thought, where I was going to be like, well, if I was the Knicks and I was going to try to attack these guys, I would try to run, because my biggest worry is that the Knicks are going to get just absolutely schooled on the rebounds, and just destroyed. Because Randle is a really good secondary rebounder. Gobert is a really great rebounder in his own right. And the Knicks just kind of have Cat and sometimes Hart, but Hart is always at his best when he's out there as the third rebounder. He put up such great rebound numbers when he did it in the playoffs too when they had less guys on the floor, but I feel like his best rebounding performances were when he was able to come out there and you already had a Randle and a Mitch out there, and then he could just crash in there and grab rebounds that way rather than having to big boy up against some 4-man and box him out every single time down the floor and whatever. I think that's just a better arrangement for Hart. So I hope they run in transition too. As far as who's going to guard Ant, I would say probably Bridges. I don't see any reason why it wouldn't be. The Knicks, for better or worse, have been putting him against the best player on the other the best perimeter player on the other team pretty much the entire year. To mix results early in the season, sort of like you said, with the Wolves being a little off, something was just off with Mikal earlier in the season, and he wasn't getting around screens as much. He wasn't harassing guys as much. It just seemed like he was kind of just going through the motions, and it felt, I don't know, maybe his brain was still stuck in Brooklyn a little bit. But lately, I think we've been seeing on both ends, he's playing a lot more like the version of himself that we thought that he would be. So Gavin, I don't know if you have a different thought, but I feel like he's probably the guy that'll draw the Ant assignment and be tasked with that.
I think so. The only fly in the ointment for that is the Knicks did sort of throw a wrench in that, where there was an obvious top wing target. They had a 2-game stretch against the Hornets and the Magic, which is, I think, not coincidentally, maybe the best their defense has looked all year, where they threw OG Anunoby on Brandon Miller and he completely shut him down. And they threw OG Anunoby on Franz Wagner and he really made him work for everything. And OG is the best option. I think it's sort of the inverse of what you were talking about with Ant, where they want to keep some mileage off him. They really want to trust Mikal Bridges' screen navigation, which was terrible by his standards to start this year and has gotten quite a bit better as time has gone along. So I could see it going either way. I have a feeling Mikal probably starts, and if Ant starts cooking, which I could see Ant really cooking Mikal, even though he's been guarding better, the way he's defended overall this season, I could see OG getting that matchup in the second half. And I'm curious to see if it's McDaniels initially against Brunson and Brunson gets going. I wonder if they pivot to Ant, because in that preseason game, Ant was kind of locking him up and he was clapping in Jalen's face. So I want to see part 2 of that. For my own ego as a fan, I need to see Jalen get some revenge in that matchup. From the Cat emotional standpoint, I do think the rally around him, this feels like a super close team. Him and OG seem to have a very specific bond based around mutual weird senses of humor. So I think they will be fired up. I think Josh Hart will probably really want to get this win for Cat. Jalen's a killer every single night. And it just feels like a big game either way. These two teams right after the Anunoby trade a year ago played one of my favorite games of the year. Ironically, Julius Randle was the hero in that one, so maybe he does it for the other side this time around. But in my memory, they've mostly played really good games in the preseason. That was an epic first half before Minnesota kind of ran away with it, if memory serves. I think the energy is going to be good. I think the vibe's going to be good. How do you think Julius and Dante handle it? Because it was obviously very emotional for Dante the first time around, the whole Rick Brunson mess. Julius didn't play. I think it'll be more emotional for him if he comes back to MSG, particularly if Knicks fans are booing him or something. He could have a strong reaction, but I'm curious how those two handle it, particularly with Dante kind of trying to get off the schneid.
Yeah, I mean, both those guys are they're trying so hard. I worry a little bit about Randle overdoing it, trying to prove hey, I can feel this guy's shoes. And I'm not going to tell Wolves fans overall how they should feel about Julius Randle, but he's a different player. We can finish where we started. He's a different guy than Karl-Anthony Towns. Yes, he's in his spot of the starting lineup and he's playing his position, but he's a different player. And if Randle plays his game and stays within himself, it feels like it's probably more likely to be a big Ant game. And I really kind of hope, and I think there's a shot, as much as I think Julius may overdo it, I think this could be a really good opportunity for DiVincenzo to hit a couple threes that send the Knicks into a timeout and the crowd goes crazy. And this is Dante gets embraced by the Timberwolves crowd, who's just been waiting to explode, for these moments for Dante, who, as loves playing to the crowd, loves the big moment. And he just hasn't had the ability to do that with the Wolves yet. And I kind of hope that this is the game where he can break through and feel more confident and comfortable as a Timberwolves player and as a important piece of their bench. I think that's very possible. And real quick on Ant, you mentioned him potentially guarding Brunson. I think you're right, where I think McDaniel starts on Brunson, but I also think Ant's going to want that assignment. And if this game's close late, this is one of those where Ant does the superstar thing where he says, no, man, I got him. Like, I know you're all defense second team, but I want to guard Brunson. I think we're going to see some of that because that's just who Ant is. And I mentioned applying himself defensively earlier. If he's not guarding Jalen Brunson, he can get a little distracted off the ball. He's not the best team defender sometimes, but if you say, hey, you're guarding the other team's best player, he looks like he's the best defender in the world. And so I think we could see some of that in this game. I think it's going to be a really, really fun game. And I'm hoping that all those guys, for Cat's sake, he's going to get a great reception. I hope he has a good game. Obviously, I hope the Wolves win. I hope Cat plays great. I hope Dante and Julius play great. I think it would be great if it was good vibes all the way around.
Well, I hope so too. I certainly also hope that Cat has a good reception coming back to Minnesota. I don't think that's in any doubt. I mentioned that I've seen some fans that were like, all aboard getting rid of him, when he got traded and whatever. But certainly a lot of the response I've seen since then has been like, man, I really miss Cat. I think that's the general sentiment from my perspective of what I've seen of, what Minnesota fans have been saying and stuff.
Yeah,
so
people love Cat. He was here so long and he saw so much, and the grass is always greener, right? So like there's always going to be people that didn't feel like, you mentioned him being soft, that being a narrative and that whole thing. But the vast majority of Timberwolves fans absolutely loved him, and it's gonna be great.